They called it a safety rule. But when Karen Brooks stood on Jake Thompson's front lawn, her arms crossed, her lips curled into a cruel smile, it was clear. This was no safety issue. This was about control. "They can't ride their bikes here anymore," she declared, her voice dripping with smug authority. "HOA rules, effective immediately." Jake's heart sank as his children's faces crumpled in confusion and sadness. Their laughter, their joy, stolen by a single line in an HOA bylaw Karen had crafted herself. "You can't do this," Jake argued, his voice shaking with anger. "They're just kids. They're not hurting anyone." Karen's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Rules are rules," she said with a cold finality, turning on her heel and strutting away, victorious. She didn't see the fury building in Jake's eyes. She didn't hear the determination in his voice as he whispered, "Not this time." She thought she could bully him like she did everyone else. She thought her power was absolute. But Karen was about to learn that when you push a man too far, you awaken something unstoppable. Jake wasn't just fighting for his kids' right to ride bikes. He was fighting for his community's freedom. And by the time he was done, Karen would regret ever declaring war on his family. But let's start from the beginning. Jake Thompson cherished his neighborhood. It was the kind of place where kids could play safely, laughter echoing down tree-lined streets. Every Saturday, his children, Emma and Noah, would race their bikes along the sidewalk, their faces glowing with pure joy. It was a scene straight out of a family movie, until Karen Brooks decided to ruin it. Karen was the self-appointed queen of the HOA. Her reign was notorious. Stories of her petty complaints were legendary, from the color of porch lights to the length of a garden gnome's hat. But Jake never imagined she would target his kids. Yet there she was, arms crossed, lips pursed, eyes narrowed like a hawk on prey. "Jake!" Her voice was icy, each word dripping with authority. "Sidewalks are public property maintained by HOA fees. Your children can't use them as a playground." Jake's stomach tightened. "They're just riding bikes, Karen. They're not bothering anyone." "It's a safety hazard and an eyesore," she snapped. "I'm implementing a new rule. No bicycles on sidewalks, effective immediately." His eyes widened. "You can't do that. They're just kids, Karen. They have every right to play." Her smile was cold, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "It's already approved. Check the updated bylaws. Have a nice day." With that, she spun around and strutted away, her head held high, leaving Jake standing there, speechless and furious. That night, Jake checked the HOA website. His heart sank. There it was, written in black and white. Section 12.4. Recreational equipment, including bicycles, are prohibited on all sidewalks within the community. The date was stamped with cold precision, the day before. It was personal. Karen always seemed to have a problem with his family. Maybe it was because they didn't fit her vision of a perfect neighborhood, or maybe it was just because they were happy and Karen thrived on control. Whatever her reason, Jake knew she wouldn't stop here. At the next HOA meeting, he confronted her. "This rule is ridiculous. It's targeting kids, my kids." Karen didn't even blink. "It's for community safety." Everyone agreed. Her gaze swept the room, daring anyone to challenge her, but nobody spoke. They all looked down, avoiding Jake's eyes. Her power over them was palpable. Jake felt his chest tighten with anger and frustration. How could they all just sit there, spineless, while Karen crushed something as innocent as kids riding bikes? He wasn't about to let her dictate how his children played, not without a fight. Jake Thompson refused to back down. He wasn't just fighting for his kids' right to ride their bikes. He was standing up to Karen's authoritarian rule. But he knew he couldn't do it alone. Determined to rally his community, Jake started knocking on doors, one by one, sharing his story and listening to his neighbors' grievances. To his surprise, he found an undercurrent of frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. Nearly every house had a story about Karen's petty tyranny. There was the Johnson family, fined $100 for a garden gnome that Karen deemed tacky and not in line with community aesthetics. Next door, the Millers whispered about being threatened for having a bird feeder that attracted too many squirrels. Even Mrs. Patterson, who had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, revealed that Karen had harassed her about the color of her mailbox, claiming it clashed with the neighborhood's color scheme. The more Jake listened, the angrier he became. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was weaponizing them, using her position to bully and control. It was no longer just about the bikes. It was about standing up to a dictator in their own backyard. United by their shared resentment, the neighbors rallied together. Jake drafted a petition demanding the reversal of the bike ban. It was carefully worded, direct, but respectful. He knew they needed to be strategic. Karen would fight dirty. Jake went door to door, clipboard in hand, collecting signatures. He listened as his neighbors vented, sharing their experiences with Karen's abuse of power. One mother fought back tears as she recounted how Karen publicly humiliated her son for drawing chalk art on the sidewalk, calling it graffiti, and threatening to report them for vandalism. Another father clenched his fists as he told Jake how Karen demanded he take down his American flag because it was too large and disruptive to the neighborhood's appearance. With nearly half the neighborhood's signatures, Jake marched into the next HOA meeting, the petition clutched firmly in his hand. His heart raced, but his resolve was unshakable. He stood tall, his voice steady as he addressed the board. "This rule is unfair, and it's hurting our community. We demand it be overturned." The room was silent, all eyes on Karen. She sat at the head of the table, perfectly poised, a cold smile playing on her lips. She didn't even bother looking at the petition. "These signatures are meaningless," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "According to HOA bylaws, only the board's approval is needed for rule changes. And as president, I represent the board's interests." Her words were sharp, final, meant to crush any hope of opposition. Jake felt his stomach drop. She had manipulated the system, twisting the rules to consolidate her power. The other board members sat in silence, eyes downcast, too afraid to challenge her. It was clear Karen ruled with fear, and no one wanted to be her next target. But Jake wasn't giving up. He spent sleepless nights combing through HOA documents, searching for a way to fight back. And then, finally, he found it. A loophole buried deep in the bylaws. If he could gather 2/3 of the homeowners' signatures, they could call for a special election to replace the HOA board. It was risky, but it was their best shot at ending Karen's reign. He rallied his neighbors again, this time with a clear mission, to replace the board and dethrone Karen. But Karen was ready. She retaliated swiftly and viciously. Overnight, violations started appearing on doors. Petty, absurd citations for minor infractions. Trash cans out of alignment. Grass too long by half an inch. A holiday wreath left up too long. One neighbor was fined $50 because their welcome mat was faded and didn't meet community standards. Jake's own house was targeted too. He came home one evening to find a bright red notice taped to his door. Violation. Obstruction of public pathways. Fined $200. It claimed his kids' bikes were blocking the sidewalk, even though they were neatly parked in his driveway, nowhere near the path. His hands shook as he read the notice, his vision blurring with anger. It was clear. Karen was retaliating, trying to break him by targeting his family. She was using the HOA as a weapon, manipulating the rules to bully anyone who dared to defy her. Jake clenched his fists, his jaw tightening with determination. Karen was trying to intimidate him, but she had underestimated his resolve. This wasn't just about bikes anymore. It was about justice, about standing up to a bully who thought she was above the rules. "That's it. Jake muttered, his voice low and fierce. His eyes burned with fiery resolve. She wants a fight? She's got one. He knew the road ahead would be tough. Karen wasn't going to back down easily, but neither was he. Jake was prepared to fight with everything he had, for his kids, for his community, and for the neighborhood he loved. Karen had started this war, but Jake was going to end it, and he wouldn't stop until justice was served. Jake knew he had to do something bold, something Karen couldn't ignore or shut down with another bylaw. That's when the idea hit him. A neighborhood bike rally. If Karen thought bikes were an eyesore, then he'd show her the most colorful, joyful display she'd ever seen. He wanted to prove a point. Kids had a right to play, to laugh, to be children. And no power-hungry HOA president was going to take that away. Jake gathered his neighbors once more, this time with a spark in his eyes and a plan that ignited hope. "We're not just fighting for bikes," he told them. "We're fighting for our community, for our kids' childhoods." The crowd erupted with applause, faces lighting up with renewed energy. Parents eagerly volunteered to help, and the kids were ecstatic. They were finally getting a chance to fight back, in the most colorful way possible. For the next few weeks, the neighborhood buzzed with excitement. Kids decorated their bikes with vibrant streamers, balloons, and handmade signs that read, "Kids have rights too," and "Let us ride." Front yards became creative workshops, with parents helping their children paint signs in bold, bright letters. The atmosphere was electric, full of laughter and anticipation. It was more than just a protest. It was a celebration of community and freedom. But Karen found out. Of course she did. She sent a mass email declaring the rally unauthorized and threatened to fine participants for public disturbances. She even claimed the event violated HOA rules on organized gatherings. But Jake was ready for her. He had done his homework, consulting the local police department and ensuring the rally was legal. As long as they stayed on the sidewalks and didn't block traffic, they were fully within their rights. Karen couldn't touch them. Not this time. The day of the rally was sunny and bright, a perfect day for riding bikes. The streets were lined with families, the air buzzing with anticipation. Kids gathered at the starting point, their bikes gleaming with decorations, faces beaming with excitement. Parents wore matching T-shirts that boldly read, "Let them ride." Jake stood at the front, megaphone in hand, ready to lead the charge. Just as the parade began to move, Karen stormed out of her house, her face red with anger, eyes blazing with fury. She marched up to Jake, her voice shrill and piercing. "You're breaking HOA rules! You'll regret this!" She looked like she was about to explode, her fists clenched, her face contorted in rage. But Jake just smiled, his voice calm but firm. "This is our neighborhood too, Karen. You don't own the sidewalks." His words hung in the air, defiant and powerful. For the first time, Karen looked shaken, her confidence cracking under the weight of community resistance. The parade of bikes rolled forward, a sea of colors and laughter echoing through the streets. Kids rang their bells, parents cheered, and onlookers clapped from their porches. Even neighbors who were too afraid to join watched in awe, some moved to tears by the sight of unity and joy. It was a beautiful display of defiance, a celebration of community spirit. But as the parade continued, Karen stood there, her face twisted in anger, her mind already scheming. She wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The morning after the rally, Jake opened his mailbox to find an envelope marked with bold, red letters. Notice of violation, unauthorized event, fined $1,000. His heart sank, then quickly turned to anger. It was Karen's latest power play, a desperate attempt to break his spirit. She thought she could scare him into submission with an outrageous fine, but this time she had gone too far. Jake's neighbor, Tom, who happened to be a lawyer, saw him staring at the letter, fury burning in his eyes. "That's ridiculous," Tom said, his voice firm. "She can't get away with this. I'll help you fight it, pro bono." Relief washed over Jake, and for the first time since this battle began, he felt hope. He wasn't alone. They spent days gathering evidence. Tom was meticulous, leaving no stone unturned. They collected footage from the rally showing Karen screaming at children, her face twisted in anger, shouting threats at parents who dared to defy her. Jake pulled up emails Karen had sent, dripping with condescension and thinly veiled threats. Neighbors came forward, giving testimonies about her abusive power, sharing stories of petty fines and harassment. It became clear Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was using her position for personal vendettas. With their case solidly built, they filed a lawsuit against Karen and the HOA, claiming she had grossly overstepped her authority. The local news picked up the story, and it spread like wildfire. HOA president tries to ban kids' bikes. Neighborhood fights back. The headline was everywhere, on TV, social media, even national news outlets. Under the harsh glare of public scrutiny, Karen's once unshakable power began to crumble. Facing mounting public pressure and growing outrage from residents, the HOA board called for an emergency meeting. It was standing room only, the entire community packed into the room, faces tense, eyes blazing with anger and determination. Jake stood at the front, surrounded by his neighbors, his head held high. Karen tried to defend herself, her voice cracking under pressure. She claimed it was about safety and community standards, but no one was buying it. The evidence was overwhelming. Videos of her tantrums, emails dripping with venom, and testimony after testimony from residents she had bullied. Her excuses fell flat, her power crumbling before everyone's eyes. When the vote came, it was unanimous. Karen was removed as HOA president, her reign of terror finally over. The new board immediately revoked the bike ban, and Jake was hailed as a hero. Neighbors approached him, thanking him for standing up, for uniting them, for bringing their community back. The rally became an annual tradition, a joyful celebration of childhood freedom and community spirit. A month later, a for sale sign appeared on Karen's lawn. She was leaving, her pride shattered, her power gone. The neighborhood collectively sighed in relief. Jake stood on his porch, watching his kids race down the sidewalk, their laughter ringing through the air. He smiled, his heart full of pride and gratitude. He had fought not just for his kids, but for his community, for their right to be free from fear and tyranny. Victory belonged to the community, and Jake knew that as long as they stood together, no dictator, no matter how powerful, could ever take that away again.